tardes, gracias a la audiencia que nos ve a través de la vía digital. Excusas por el retraso, pero queríamos, ¿verdad?, que el personal de apoyo de la Cámara hiciera las labores de desinfección apropiadas. Agradecemos naturalmente a la Cámara de Comercio por la oportunidad de conversar en esta tarde acerca de este tema que definitivamente va a cambiar el futuro de Puerto Rico. No sé para qué lado, ¿verdad?, pero sin duda va a cambiarlo. Naturalmente vamos a cambiar al idioma inglés por respeto al señor Stensby y esperamos que sea un diálogo en el cual podamos entender un poco, ¿verdad?, lo que le espera a Puerto Rico a raíz de la decisión fundamental que tomó el gobierno transfiriendo a un operador privado la red eléctrica de Puerto Rico. Y yo me voy a sentar junto a los panelistas. Good afternoon to all of you. My pleasure being here. I would like, if you may, so probably I would like to get some color from you, a very short summary in terms of how or why pursuing a different model to manage and to operate Puerto Rico's power grid could be transforming. Either for which way, for the better or for the worse. I hope it's for the better, but I think that it would be, first of all, why that was the decision and what are your expectations with that? And then we'll go into the details.
Okay. Thank you, Joanisabel, and thank you, everybody, for the opportunity of being here today and participating. I'll take this to begin just because it was the P3's task to embark on this process from the beginning. So we have been leading this from day one, I would say. It was definitely a decision that was made in the legislature, and we are abiding by it, and we run the process. But I think if we go back in time as to why and when this decision was made, it was clear that this decision came in as a result of what happened after Hurricane Irma and Maria. As we know, the average person in Puerto Rico spent almost 90 days without power, and the restoration of the entire electric grid did not come back into place until after a full year after the hurricanes. So I think it is within that context that in January 2018, the decision is made to essentially admit that what we have been doing was not working and we needed to try something else. And that's when the former governor announced his decision to privatize or to move in search of private operation of the electric system. And in the summer of 2018, Act 120 was passed. I think we all know as Puerto Ricans and citizens and most importantly consumers and clients of PREPA that what we had was not working. I think it will be a difficult task to look for someone out there in Puerto Rico that has not suffered one way or another because of the I would say condition of the electric system. It is something, as we saw in the numbers before, that is historical. This does not happen in 2017 or 2018. It's an accumulation of issues, an accumulation of debt, a lack of maintenance in the system, a lack of investment in the system, and instability in management and the operation of the system. All of the things that I think the PREPA board has addressed. You know, we need that continuity. We need that stable leadership. We need a stable plan. And what the process was looking for was to bring in that stability, to bring in a private operator that could take control of the system for a long period of time, to follow an IRP, not be changing past every 4 years or generation plans. You know, we saw that with the Southern Pipeline, we saw that with the Villa Verde, we saw that with the Aguirre Gasport, and if we sit around, we can all think of all the different changes in past that have taken place over the years, and we were looking to right that ship, and I think this was, I would say, the bet or the decision that, you know, we already know that what hasn't worked, and we need to find a solution, and we need to try something else, and this.
So it was a policy decision.
It's a policy decision.
It's not something like adding up factors or analyzing if it's feasible, how much in savings we're going to make throughout time. It's a policy decision.
It's definitely a policy decision, and I don't know if somebody else was going to speak, and I jumped to answer, but it's a policy decision. But I think, you know, if we were to go and do that type of analysis, it will be endless, because it will be all assumptions, based on assumptions. If we could do this, then maybe we could fix it. If we could have done this one way or the other, then maybe we wouldn't be in this decision. But the problem in the end will be the same. We can all sit down and do an X-ray analysis of PREPA and think of what we could do better and what could be done. But if we have no stable leadership and we have a continuance of political appointments or political decisions that interfere, then, you know, there will be no change, because we will still be betting on maintaining our current field, but we won't have that stability that we have now under a long-term contract with a private operator.
Given that reality, I need to ask this question to Mr. Velez. Is the Bureau prepared to oversee a private player? When we, at the beginning, when Puerto Rico established the Bureau, or the Energy Commission at the beginning, we were thinking about overseeing PREPA, not necessarily overseeing a private operator. Is the board, or is the Bureau, I should say, is ready to take on this task, which is totally different? It's not overseeing PREPA, which was a public corporation, a government entity. Now you have a third party who basically is representing PREPA, and it's the party who is going to be making any kind of claims to the Bureau.
The answer is yes. Yes, we are. We see no difference between regulating a public entity like PREPA and a private entity like LUMA. For us, it's all about what is in the Act 17, what the legislator delegating us to comply with, overseeing the private entity. And even more, we will not only regulate LUMA, we already have other entities that we are regulating. So we are prepared. We already have established regulation. Regulation is in place to do our work. And yes, we are ready.
In that sense, I think that everybody's expecting, and I know that Mr. Stensby probably would like to comment on this. However, I bet that everybody is waiting for what LUMA is going to be asking the Bureau in the coming weeks. People are specifically obsessed with rates, and I do wonder, how do you see that first approach if, in fact, LUMA has reviewed PREPA's operations, and if, in fact, you would be willing to consider a revision of the rate so soon? I should have said this before. How would you grade PREPA? You've been dealing with it, and I wonder, how would you grade PREPA? And then we will talk about rates or reliability and so on.
Okay, so I think I heard 4 questions there, but anyway, and if I might, I just want to make an opening remark in terms of the structure and it may feel very new for customers here in Puerto Rico. But I can share that, you know, in our experience, and if you look around the globe, having investor-operated utilities, having oversight from a regulatory commission or regulatory board, in some cases having a mixture of municipal or government-owned utilities and investor-owned utilities all kind of reporting into the same regulator is a tried and true method for running efficient and effective utilities. So although I recognize it may feel new and unique here in Puerto Rico, the model and the structure is actually well proven around the world. I don't care whether you work in Australia or whether you work in the mainland US or whether you work in Canada or whether you work in the UK. It's a well-established framework, and so I think that's a great place to start. Is we're not creating something new and unique. There's lots of models to draw from. You know, the loaded question, it's opportunity rich, I think is the way to describe PREPA. There are many, you know, the board that was up here a few minutes ago has indeed undertaken many very important initiatives in their time. And I think they would be the first to suggest that, that there's lots more to do. I think one of our biggest challenges, as I sort of cast my eye out, is you know, making sure we're working in the right priorities and putting our resources. Nobody can tackle everything simultaneously, and if we get distracted and we chase everything at the same time, we won't achieve what's important. And so for us, it's bringing a new way of thinking about customers and customer relationships, and viewing ratepayers as customers. You won't hear us talk about ratepayers. We talk about customers. We are business people, just like the members who are part of the Chamber of Commerce, and we understand the value of customers and the importance of customers. So it's tackling customer service. Simultaneously, it's about reliability and resiliency, and you know, when you circle all back and everybody wants to hear about cost, we're going to find a way to keep ourselves in a cost-constrained world, because if we don't do that, we've forgotten about the customer, and we'll face, you know, headwinds that we just can't overcome. So as we move to our early regulatory submissions, which will occur early in the new year, yeah, we're going to be cost-constrained inside of the existing rate order. That's important for us.
Would you elaborate a little, but also specifically in terms of what LUMA is expected? I mean, because for so many people, it's like you're the private operator, but people don't really understand what you're going to be in charge of. What is your role specifically? And it's not only about cables and so on. What specifically LUMA is going to be doing for the government of Puerto Rico or PREPA?
Yeah, so as you think about PREPA today, PREPA has a fairly conventional, vertically integrated utility, to use kind of utility speak. So the generation is broadly PREPA's, you know, with the exception of AES and Ecoelectrica. The control center and the dispatch of that generation, the operation of the high voltage transmission system, and then the operation of the distribution system, all the way to the meter on your house or on a business. The billing, all of the conversations with customers. So LUMA will effectively be, and I realize I'm oversimplifying it, but will effectively be everything except for that generation operator. So, you know, when your home or business is looking for a new electrical connection, you will call LUMA. When you, the trucks that are driving around the street to restore electricity or to connect new homes or businesses to electricity, they will be driven by people who work for LUMA. When you have a call or a question about your bill, you'll call LUMA. The bill will say LUMA at the top. and everything behind that that gets electricity to your home and answers all of your questions about electricity, LUMA will provide. So we're the customer-facing element of the business, and the stuff behind the scenes is operating the transmission system, rebuilding the transmission system, getting that federal funds invested in a way that brings maximum impact to customers in Puerto Rico.
So that means that certainly you're going to be operating the grid, basically, and customer service, but you won't have the last word in terms of capital improvements or investing in those. Who will be responsible of improving the grid from an infrastructure, from a CAPEX standpoint?
Yeah, so we will be responsible and accountable for that. The last word sits with my friend down at the end here. So, you know, it's that natural oversight and tension, I suppose, between the regulator and the operator, between LUMA. So we'll bring forward investment plans. Every one of those investment plans will have, you know, connections to customer costs, and we'll build cases, and we'll say, in our humble opinion, this is the best approach. And then the regulatory body will work through that, will involve kind of all customers around Puerto Rico, and in the end, we'll form a ruling that says, you know, thank you, LUMA, and here's the answer.
Who will be paying? I'm sorry.
Here, important to clarify that the Act 17 already established the guides, and the Bureau adopted them through the IRP. So the IRP is the planning for the next 20 years here in Puerto Rico, and it's already adopted. So everybody, including LUMA or any other private player, have to comply with the IRP. So that's the new rules, and everybody have to understand them. So LUMA wants to build something. No, they cannot, if not already adopted in the IRP. So like Fermín said, the old times are gone when some governor think that this new project is good for Puerto Rico. Maybe he was right, maybe he was not. Right now, that's gone, because the IRP, which was a process with public participation and lasted like 6 months, was adopted. So we had to comply with that in order to move forward the economy of Puerto Rico, because the IRP, for sure, established the least cost option, not only for generation, but for an optical T&D system.
I would like to get this clear, and then we'll go to the IRP. Who will pay for those major improvements, for all those capital improvements? You said that certainly you'll be responsible of making sure that everything is done correctly, but who will be paying for those capital expenditures, those improvements? Would it be the federal government? Would it be the local government? Would it be the ratepayer? Or would be, the customer?
So, I mean, there's a Title III bankruptcy conversation in here as well, but for as long as PREPA remains in Title III, you can't go to the capital market, as we discussed, and so all improvements are funded either out of customer rates, in which case they're actually not even really capitalized, and through the large amount of FEMA funding that's been obligated. So our number one focus is on the FEMA funding. I think without the FEMA funding, you will not get sufficient CapEx in order to restore the reliability of the network for customers. There is potential post exit from Title III when there once again becomes access to debt markets to get back to a more conventional capital improvement program. But I still think the vast majority of capital over the term is going to come from FEMA funding.
In general terms, we're paying basically 17 cents a kilowatt right now. However, people who have read the contract, people who think that this pathway is not feasible. They say that there's no way that we're going to keep those rates. A couple of years ago, the Oversight Board established a target. It said back then that Puerto Rico should be paying about 20 cents kilowatt hour. However, people who have seen the contract, people who have read the IRP, say that there is no way that we're going to be on that range when we consider what we need to pay bondholders and what we need to pay in pensions. What has happened with that target on the board's view? Is that something only a wishful thinking or not? And especially with the chairman of PREPA said, I mean, they said maybe this is not about rates, it's about resiliency and reliability and frequency. So where's that 20-cent kilowatt hour target now?
Look, I think what the target is, the board will always look for what's the lowest target possible, right? The goal is to have the most affordable rate possible given the current circumstances. I think the chairman of the PREPA board was accurate in saying, you know, there's priorities, right? So maybe we need to invest now in getting the system up to the state of good repair that it should be, and then we can focus on lowering the rates. I don't think, you know, whether that's the right order. I think it's up to PREP with the input of LUMA, but ultimately, what you're looking for is a top to bottom, side to side transformation of the system, because without that, I think what the Oversight Board has shown consistently in the fiscal plan is there will be no reduction in rates, and there will be no reliable system. And I think it goes back to the panel before, where, you know, depending on the type of customer that you're targeting, what matters changes. So for a commercial customer, it might be more about reliability, and that's certainly something important. And for a residential customer, it might be actually, you know, price. So it's a matter of getting to a point where you have a balance, where you have a system that's reliable, that is well maintained, that breaks down very little, so people are not investing in having generators at their homes, and the fuel and the maintenance that surrounds or is around that, and then also getting to a place where it's affordable, but it's affordable based on the conditions in Puerto Rico, and not setting ourselves to a target that, you know, maybe it's not achievable. So I think what we need to do is make sure that we've identified what are the problems that we're facing in the system, whether those be on the operational side or on the maintenance side. And then we set a plan to fix those and improve those. That's the IRP, that's the system remediation plan that LUMA is working on. And then based on that, you set a target for what the rates will be. And I think the good thing, and we touch about this, and Wayne was certainly pointing to this, is one of the main objectives that the board set out, a couple of years back, when, you know, I wouldn't say it's 2019, even the 2018 fiscal plan, was that we needed to establish a strong regulatory environment. That included strengthening the role of the regulator, providing them with the financial and substantive independence that they needed to come up with the right decisions, so that they can provide the right oversight to PREPA, to LUMA, or to any other company that comes into Puerto Rico, into the energy market. And in that process, by setting up that regulatory framework that's transparent, that provides public comment or public participation, and that it's bases decisions on evidence, that's where you will get the optimal results. So I think the bet really is in this relationship between LUMA and PREP, and mixed with the interaction that the public will have through those processes, will provide and will result in the best outcome for the people of Puerto Rico.
Considering all the information you have at the Bureau, and you, Mr. Stensby, considering everything that you know now about PREPA, is that 20-cent target rate feasible or not?
Let me put this that way, the answer. If most of the investment, capital investment in the T&D system will be covered by federal funds with no charge to customers, first. And second, transformation aimed to open generation to competition to lower generation costs. For sure, we're going to be tomorrow in a better position than we are today, for sure.
But you didn't address the question regarding the 20% target rate. Mr. Stensby, is it visible or not?
Can I interrupt, and I'll throw you a towel? Giovanni, I think it's important, and I'm sorry to interrupt the conversation, but
No, of course.
when we go back to your first question, and you talk about the contract and the people that analyze the contract, people always intertwine the contract with the debt and the pension liability. So when we're talking about rates, it's one thing to talk about the rates that are generated by PREPA and what the operational aspect of PREPA is another thing to talk about the impact that the RSA and the debt and the pension liability may have on what the customer is ultimately paying. So I think, we need to address those two issues differently, because we still don't know what the impact of the RSA is going to be, but we do know that there is a debt that has to be paid. The same thing with the pension liability. So
I do understand that, but every month the customer will see the entire bill. So that's the reason I'm asking, and that's the reason so many people are concerned. Not only owners, businesses, the manufacturing sector, they're really concerned in terms of what they're going to be getting once we made the decision of hiring a third private party to run the grid.
Maybe here's my attempt at answering it without being evasive. We all understand that the rates are complex, right? And it's got fuel for generation, and it's got debt, and the pension conversation, and so you build up the stack, right? It's like going. I always describe it as like going to buy gas for your car, and there's a little chart there that talks about the real cost of the gas and then the price you end up paying, and what LUMA is committed to doing is to work within the existing rate order and rate structure, and not costing customers more than the PREP operation is costing today. We're going to make sure we're inside and underneath of those costs, because we understand that customers just can't pay more and more and more and more. But it is a very complex conversation, and I know everybody would like a number, and I think the number is challenging to get to.
Let's talk a little bit about reliability. LUMA is going to be practically in charge of implementing the integrated resource plan. So far, do you think that what the Bureau has approved, which by the way, in some cases is pretty demanding and challenging, if that is something achievable within a reasonable period of time? When we take a look at the LUMA's contract, you have an enormous list of standards and metrics that you must overcome probably in a 3 to 5 year period. That integrated resource plan, it's complex and it's very challenging, specifically with renewables. Do you think that plan should be revised, or you're simply abiding by the board, just by what the Bureau, approved just a couple of months ago?
Before you answer, Wayne, I just want to clarify that the IRP, like I said before, Act 17 clearly establishes the goals.
I know.
So what the
But
IRP...
you're the guardian of such policy.
And the IRP adopted what the law says.
Exactly. I do understand that.
So more than that, in the process of adopting the IRP, we run simulations. So if feasible, it can be done. So what is important here, that every party, LUMA, FAM, P3, the people of Puerto Rico, PREPA, put all the efforts needed to move forward Puerto Rico and the ARP. So that's what is needed here.
I think that the regulator has spoken, but Mr. Stensby?
Almost forgot the question. No,
If you think
we,
that
we
the
don't.
RFP need to be amended or
No.
revised?
No, is the short answer. There is much to do, right? There is much to do. Federal funding is a significant effort. Complying with and advancing renewable energy and following the framework of the IRP itself is a significant effort, and we're up for that task. And I think it would be a huge mistake. You know, one of the, you asked me kind of at the beginning, you know, what do we see for opportunities? And I think one of the opportunities is to stop with the analysis and get started, right? Just put one foot after the other and get started. I mean, that was our proposal when we responded to the P3's process, is we are doers, and it's so important to stop the studies and stop the analysis and actually take a few steps. I'm sure along the path we will discover that there's some things that are not quite the way we all imagine them to be. That's what great companies and great organizations do, is they will then, you know, take another look at the landscape and take the next step. But it's time for us to all kind of get started and focus on the big outcomes, which is reliability, resiliency, and improving, you know, electricity for customers in Puerto Rico.
We're all for renewables, and certainly there is a concrete goal in just a couple of years. People say we're going to keep adding renewables. The question is, right now, how much the grid can support? I think that people are asking for all these kind of projects, but the grid at this very moment, how much can it support?
I think it's the wrong question. I just think it's the wrong question.
Okay. Go ahead. No, of course, go ahead.
With all respect, because, you know, and my dear colleague David Owens was up here earlier, and in a much more eloquent way than I'll be able to do, we could describe, you know, some of the impact and some of the studies that would have to be undertaken, and, you know, we could get to an ultimate penetration level of renewables, and we could talk about supply adequacy, and there's all sorts of really technical, I mean, I am an engineer, right? You can't get it out of me, but I don't think that's what customers get excited about. I think what customers get excited about is the fact that electricity starts to become boring. It just works. And when it doesn't work, they can call somebody and they answer the phone, and then they come fix it. And they, like, something much more grassroots. And
I understand that.
So
but
while the renewables industry, and while lots of people would like to talk about, you know, how many megawatts we can get to, we can certainly get much further advanced than we are today, and that's our, you know, that's what the IRP sets out, and that's where we're headed.
And Joanisabel, if I can add into what Wayne was saying, you know, if someone were able to provide you that number of what it is today, it certainly is not what it can be tomorrow and what can be the day after, if you start improving the system. I think that was where Member Owen was going towards. That you need to fix the system. You need to get it into a place where it can achieve the goals of Act 17. So that is certainly one of the key items.
So how long will it take us to improve the system from the standpoint of capital improvements, but also in terms of the quality of service? It's just that when we're listening to all of you talking about these important investments, the need to bet on or to buy on renewables, I think that there's an agreement on that, but at the very end, it's how we can make it. And the truth is that we've been talking about renewable projects for more than a decade, and we've been talking about wheeling for more than a decade, and things seems not to move forward. So at the very end, I think that it's a challenge. And this takes me to the other question. We are counting that we're going to have reliable energy every day. But at the very end, we depend on the generation side of the equation. So if that's the case, certainly we're not going to be able to, get away or get rid of blackouts and so on. Would you please provide some color?
Okay. Currently, we are around 3% of renewable in the system. The last study that I remember established the system at it was allows like 15%. So we can inject right now more renewable up to 12 more, up to 15%. And then the IRP considered that in order for renewable to get in, as established in Act 17, we have to make some improvement. But the improvement were considered as part of the IRP. So the whole idea is that as renewable gets into the system will be able to get the renewable injected to the system.
And Joanisabel, I think you raise a good question, right? Reliability is not only on the T&D side, it's also dependent on generation. I would say, however, that a portion of blackouts and brownouts are due to transmission and distribution related.
Absolutely.
So you have vegetation management, so that's certainly a focus of why we're bringing in this private operator with experience. So to the extent that you start fixing the reasons for blackouts and brownouts on the T&D side, that's an improvement to the service. But to your question on generation, that is certainly something that needs to be addressed, and that's another of the pillars of transformation, right? We're not just going to say, we've got a private operator for T&D, okay, goodbye, now the transformation is done. That is just only one element. The other element is to bring in, it's actually two-part. It's to bring in a private operator, one or more private operators, to manage efficiently and effectively the remaining fleets in PREPA's generation system. And then the really important part where we should really be focusing on is to start procuring all these new resources, so procuring new renewables, procuring new microgrids, and replacing these outdated generation systems with new modern technologies. As you do that, you should get those improvements in reliability, but that is a long process. That takes time, it takes consistency. It requires an operator responsible for procuring and doing the planning. It requires a regulator that are there, that are independent and are able to plan on a long term. Because what you mentioned there's all this talk about 10 years talking about integrating renewables. Well, that is because we had no independence, a PREPA that was highly politicized and turned with every year, every election. That's what we're trying to break. We're trying to say, okay, the electricity industry requires, people to think not in 4 years, but in 5, 10, 20 years. That's why we're bringing the expertise and the stability so that we can make those decisions and really execute. Because that's a really important element. We can talk about plans, but there's no value in a plan if you're not executing the plan, if you're not making, issuing the contracts, if you're not investing in the projects. That is where the focus should be, and that is certainly why we're bringing LUMA, why we're strengthening the operator, and why we're focusing on an operator for the generation.
Would you, we can take advantage of the minutes we have left. Would you tell us, or would you explain some of the key metrics that we should be holding LUMA accountable for in the near future? Whether it's the SAIDI index or safety, I think that people should kind of get an idea in terms of what is expected, what should happen when you called. If a customer calls is saying that they are in disagreement with whatever happens with their bill or something.
Yes, and I have to observe, I've worked in a few places, I've never worked anywhere where anyone knew what SAIDI was. And I think honestly, it speaks to almost how challenging the reliability has been over, as it decreased probably over a decade, and then like the mere fact we can actually, I can have a conversation with a journalist about Sadie and Safi is remarkable to me. It's no one else in the world will know what you're talking about, but at a very kind of more kind of customer-centric level, yeah, it is. How often does the electricity go out? When it does go out, how long does it go out for? It is, how long does it take us to answer the phone when we're called? It is, when we answer the phone, how many times do we get to first call resolution? So you call, you have a question, we provide you the answer, you consider the question answered, is a very important element in the way we measure customer service. The broad customer service kind of conventional ways of thinking about customer service, which is, are you able to reach the electricity company when you try? Are you getting the information you need? Does your bill correct? When you have a question about your bill, does it get resolved? Billing mistakes, errors, all of those things. When you're looking for, and I know I keep focusing on new connections, so how quickly will we respond to new connections? You have a new home or a new business and you want electricity, or you need an inspection service so that, if you're a home builder, so that you can actually turn the home over to your customer. That's working on the revenue side of the equation, and we're going to measure those and we're going to report out on all of those, because not only are we kind of focused on the cost side, but we need to improve the revenue line, which means we need to help all of just what I talked about, the members of the chamber, to provide better service to their customers.
In the case of the reliability of the service, when do you think customers will start noticing a difference?
I think so. That's a very challenging question, right? And it took decades to get where we are, and so it won't be overnight to get to something remarkably better. But I think in that kind of 3-year mark, customers will be able to see a meaningful difference. I think on the customer service side, we'll get there much quicker. But I think some of those longer-term reliability investments, that large amount of FEMA funding, is going to take that 3-5 year time frame.
Will that satisfy the Bureau?
Here it's important to know that LUMA and PREP have to establish the baseline during the front-end transition. And after that, PREP will oversee LUMA performance.
And your guidance will be the contract, all the metrics that are in the contract?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So PREP will oversight and will decide if they are compliant or not, if we have to give them some kind of fine or give them some kind of performance.
For those willing to track those metrics, they are in Section 5 of the contract, of the LUMA contract,
exactly.
For those willing to track performance. There are a couple of issues. First, there's still a lot of controversy regarding the contract. There's still a battle, I think, at the appeals court here. Was that resolved or not regarding the OTR challenge of the contracting process?
On the energy compliance certificate,
Yes.
yes, it was resolved in favor of the P3 authority, and the motion
that
for
is concluded.
reconsideration as well.
Okay.
I don't think it's final, but
Well, they still have,
the appeal court already solved in favor of the certificate.
Because of the complexities of Title III, did LUMA consider ever to just quit the race and not being here today? Due to the complexities of the Puerto Rico, of PREPA's financial situation, did you consider just to quit the race and not staying here today?
Well, let me back up. I guess did we have some serious, as you know, we competed against first 5 and then 4 very large. We were one of 4, I guess, companies that effectively competed through this process. Were there many conversations about, you know, is this the right opportunity? For sure there was, and you know, there are lots of challenges, right? Starting with PREPA is bankrupt, and generally speaking, people don't run to do business with bankrupt entities, right? It's not a good business practice. So yes, along the way, for sure, there were many moments where we, you know, worked hard in the process to understand, was there a way through? But I go back to, you know, probably what I said 4.5 months ago when we had the award was, right from the beginning, the process itself for us was rigorous, was robust, was well run, and that's how Puerto Rico was able to attract the 4 competitors, and in the end, you know, the two significant bids that allowed us to get here today. So we invested a lot of time, a lot of money, and we're not going anywhere. We're here for 15 years, and I hope at the end of 15 years, you like us so much you want to give us another 15 years.
Well, before we leave, I do have a question, a very last question. A couple of weeks ago, there was an agreement between FEMA and PREPA regarding the use of federal funds for reconstruction. Would you provide some kind of update? What should be happening at this very moment in order to start dispersing those funds?
So, and I think maybe that would have been a better question for the panel before, but within the first 90 days, that after the award, PREPA has to prepare a plan of how they intend to deploy those funds and start working. And from then on, it's an interaction with FEMA on what is approved and how they can proceed. So I think by the time LUMA takes over the operation next summer, I think PREPA and LUMA will be working hand in hand on how to deploy those funds and move forward.
So PREPA is the one working with that, not LUMA? Or
Well,
you're working together?
PREPA is the sub-grantee, so they're managing the process as of now, but they're working together with LUMA during the process. Once LUMA takes over the operation, LUMA will be managing the funds and everything. But it's really work that's been done hand in hand between LUMA and PREPA.
Do you need to consider or to submit those plans to the Bureau?
Yes, that's what important. Those plans have to comply with the RP. That's
Okay.
final.
Okay. Thank you
Yes.
so much for your time. It's been a pleasure. Thank you to the Puerto Rico Chamber of Commerce and those in the audience watching us over Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you.